Aloha mai kako, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Moana Nui podcast. I am Moana here, and I'm excited to have you guys with us. Thank you for tuning in and listening. I am joined by my beautiful co-host on that side.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dana with, also you can find me at Danique Events, and we're very excited for you to listen and ask questions for our next guest.
So our guest tonight is Dedren Snead. He's the creator and writer of the Glyph Comics Award-nominated comic book series Sorgum and Spear. And he's also the creator-writer of the upcoming Turnkey comic book series. He is a writer, content creator, and being both a futurist and a retroist, his mind wanders throughout the space-time continuum with a 10-year plus or minus right around 1993 as the focal point for many of his fandoms. Dedren is also the co-host of the new Wakanda podcast and the head writer at RAZRWING Incorporated. And we will bring him on now. Welcome, Dedren.
Hi, y'all. Good day, ladies. And hopefully everyone at home doing well. Good.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Let's kick it off a little bit by having you tell us a little bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up and how did you find yourself in comics and media?
Yeah, let's see. So my name is Dedren Snead. I'm from Snow Hill, North Carolina. And, I've been in comics all my life as far as looking at it from starting as a collector as a kid and just through school. Always wanted to draw and make my own characters and tell my own stories. And a lot of times just simply not seeing characters and stories and situations that I felt like represented me and the people that I knew and the places I wanted to go. I started making comics, and a lot of times just finding myself at conventions and saying, one day I'm going to be on the other side of that table, and, making that plunge eventually with my first comic book, Sorghum and Spear, and, haven't looked back and now take my time, to transition to a full-time opportunity to create comics and transmedia with a platform called Subsume, where we partner with like-minded individuals to work in the intersect of technology, creativity, and community.
Now, Dedren, what is your ethnic background and how does your culture influence your work?
Thank you. That's a great question. So background for me, I pretty much identify solely as African-American, though I'm sure there's some parts and portions of family that, we can all draw from. But, I'm happy to look at myself as first a devout Southerner. So I think my Southern upbringing in rural Eastern North Carolina, where there were more pigs than people and the fireflies told you when to go home. I grew up in a very isolated space. That said, my love affair with books, just any type of books, from comic books, encyclopedias, to anything I could get my hand on. And the best thing you could give me was a blank piece of paper, right? And just kind of growing up in that sense. And just my family was extremely small, but in a good sense, looking back, we're very well read. Like, we had a lot of newspapers come through the house. My mom was always a proponent of, if you can't do anything else, you can sit down and learn. So my thing was always to sit down and learn things. And with that, just again, for me, I was the kid at home taking apart computers and restapling comics and trying to make things. So I've always been a maker in that sense. And I think that just that good, what we call good, air quotes, traditional Southern living's been a big play into the way that I draw from. So a lot of that's community, matriarchy's a big thing for me. I grew up pretty much in a home with just women. And so I think looking at like that lineage and that passing of culture and secrets and I guess in more of like almost in a Cartesian type way, like just that the language of women is just something that's always enamored me and always found like a source of strength and power. And to that, all of my characters just in happenstance, probably influenced by that in some ways and form, were always women. So like if there was a lady character on a video game, I'd always choose her. Or if there was a character that it was all men, I was like, well, okay, there's got to be a lady in here somewhere. And kind of looking back at it at that, I think it was just like that's how my very first Dungeons and Dragons campaign started, which ended up being a lot of the stories that we see now for Sorghum and Spear, because it was just an idea when I went to college. I went to NC State, and I was that very stereotypical D&D nerd growing up. I just had like a massive amount of books, and I was so happy to try to have people play. But when I went to NC State, it was a chance to actually find just other kind of black geeks for the very first time. So I wasn't the one in my county, like that I was that nerd. Everybody knew to come to me if you needed like what is it, like the if you needed to know like a cheat code for like the Sega Genesis or something, like people call my house. You know how to need to take something apart, or why was who did Skeletor bring in on episode 3? I just had all this geek stuff memorized at this point. But at that same time, there's a lot of Pan-Africanism going on when I was in college, and again, that was the first time I think I truly took a step back and looked at what was being represented on the page. Right, it was some characters were black, and of course we always would engage and try to look at who's the black character on the show, right? It's like we had to make Panther the Black Thundercat, right? We had you had to you're trying to find yourself so hard in media back then, and then a lot of times taking a more reflective look at it, a lot of times it wasn't the word one could say authentic, but then another one could say appreciated. And you could tell, very plainly that, we weren't writing our own stories. And I think with that and a chance to write stories is why I really fell in love with like Dungeons and Dragons and fantasy and role-playing games. Because as a dungeon master, I could write the story. And then in the sense, being able to make this narrative where there was a group of women that were saving the world this time, and they happen to be black women, because I can't find any book that exists in, so we're going to make one. And so that started back in the 90s. It was called Bronze and Blood, and it was a fact that these women just went around and just beat everything up, right? Anything that they could do to fight. And a lot of times that's the fun of Dungeons and Dragons back then, and being able to draw the characters and make them. That's where it started. And my character was named NAMAZZI, and over time, eventually when I went back to think, okay, what could I make a comic book of? I grabbed all these old Dungeons and Dragons stories that I'd written and put it together and aged back my character to when she was a girl. And a lot of that is the story of the very first book, Sorghum and Spear.
That's so cool. So speaking of Sorghum and Spear, in that series, the All-Mother Eshe is modeled off the iconic and beautifully talented Nichelle Nichols. Did you mean to have Eshe favor this iconic figure, and how did that happen?
Oh, absolutely. That was as intentional as it could possibly be. Thinking back to those examples of people and finding yourself represented in your fandoms. I love science fiction as well as fantasy. And one of my earliest memories of seeing a black character on television was Nichelle Nichols. And now it wasn't on the original Star Trek. It was actually on the Nickelodeon cartoon of Star Trek that came on. And so she was the black character there. And I can remember just playing with toys, and I saw, seeing her character on there, and I'm like, who is that? Right. And she was smart and, drawn well, I guess, as a young kid could say. And it was just like, that was just my character. So whenever that show came on, I was just right there in the front. And then going back eventually, being able to see Star Trek, that was a wrap, between and so she's always been like my character that I'd always go back to when I was drawing or looking at it. And it was a fandom and an admiration of who she was, not only with with her classic role there, but again, eventually finding out, her influence outside, off screen, and in later years, it was like she really had a lot of good intersects back then to, representing not just black people, not just women, not just people of color, but then taking that legacy and making it translate to something off screen. And so the other people that she influenced by her, just simply by her presence, but then even more so by her action, made it where she was somebody I've always just revered. And eventually, just like a lot of conventions, kind of going back to it, fast forwarding, as a strapping young man, there was a couple of times I had a chance to meet her. But again, it's in a very the same sense that a lot of times back before COVID, when you can actually interact with people, you could get in line and you could get things signed. So I had I've got a Barbie doll of her, and I wanted it signed, and so so it just kind of was a very first thing, and it was year after year I'd bring some part of memorabilia, and like on the Eastern Coast, just would always find her and find some reason to get in her line to get something signed. Long and short, I'd said something in passing like, one day I'm going to make a comic book, and then you're going to be in it, and I'm sure just like she's heard this a million times. And eventually, a couple years later, when I did make Sorghum and Spear, I came back with her, and I left a copy with her, and said, okay, I finally did it. Of course, she didn't remember that, but eventually, one of her people reached back out to me and said, you know what, she wants to talk to you about this book, and so I had a chance to like converse with her about the book and my appreciation of her and things like that. And it's just one of those things that it ended up being great timing, where I had no idea, no intentions of bothering this lady no more than I already had. But a special opportunity between that and long and short is that Sorghum and Spear was picked up as an animation. And so then this thing became a thing. And then it was, okay, well, now I'm out in California trying to get this show pushed to the next level, get it out of development. And so they brought her on as a voice for her character, which obviously gives some credence to that. And so now we're business partners. And so now I'm at her house talking like this is like not real. This is not reality. And and in that sense, it was a special time for anybody. That's a special time anytime, but it was especially special because I felt like it was kind of just a 180 vindication of what idea and the concept somebody had inspired me just and meant so much to like be sitting having tea with this lady is like that's not real. And I mean, it still makes me smile to this day that thinking of her always, that those were like some great opportunities and some great times to connect. And then eventually when she came back to Atlanta for what ended up being her final show, she was gracious enough to have dinner with me and some select friends. And present company might have had a chance to break bread with us, and it was a time of my life. And this lady bestowed a kiss on my cheek that I feel to this day. And and I was done. So I'm completely in love with this woman. And again, she just means so much creatively and personally. So it was just a great overall story for me.
Yeah, what an honor that is. I mean, Nichelle Nichols, she set the foundation for so many Black women in media and in film. It is kind of like what you were talking about, like finding yourself represented in fandoms. That's something I definitely, tried to do too as a kid. And for me, it's really hard because like I'm Hawaiian and there's even now there's very few, right? So, but I definitely gravitated more to the people of color, and definitely for Star Wars, not Star Wars, Star Trek. I'm sorry. Don't shoot me, guys. But my mom, was a big fan of that. And so we would watch that. And she, she was the character that I would definitely gravitate to. So I'm just, wow. I bet it was interesting. Like, how do you control your fanboy, like in those, in those moments, right?
Oh, right. You try to be as manifold and mindful of the point. The short answer, there is no control. You have to kind of get it out some other way, right? But again, I think the way for me was to try to honor her legacy as best I could with like the next campaign that we did. Yeah. And so I think making it, that was my release of trying to really bring like the best of the best that I possibly could to honor her legacy in a way and show like, this wasn't just me fanboying, but it was me wanting to be honorable and kind of make the impact I hope that like her presence in the book would be for some young girl or some person to see the same way that she impacted me.
You could just tell like how she was so enamored by, you know, not only the artwork of herself, but the work itself. And then, you know, like I was so interested in how she went from that to now, you know, becoming an executive producer for your animation and the voice actor. And I mean, especially, you know, you could tell how much she loved you. It's like kissing you on your cheek and just grabbing you close and everything, whenever she saw you and all. But it with that the whole animation, it's like, you know, I was actually going to ask you, like, how did that come that you were able to get that piece of her being more involved in it, but and with that whole process, and has she, you know, with her being a producer and being your partner also with the animation, is she adding her own flair or her own influence in helping the animation take its form from the comic?
That's a perfect question, and I would say that at least for the influence that she had initially was in some of the language that Eshe had in the next book. Mm-hmm. Of course, you know, we look at it, and of course, you know, as timeless as she is, we have to have this particular consideration based on her age and things that, you know, we don't want to take any interaction with her for granted. You know, we want to make sure that we can kind of have the best of that. So we actually did an audio recording, and with her, and so she actually went in. So we had written a script, and so we went to her house and went over the script, and basically line by line, you know, she went through and talked about, you know, well, what does this mean? Because we had words like abiku and other parts, and so she was really engaged in making sure like the way that her character talked would be something like she felt like she would be imparting like wisdom to, you know, a life lesson to somebody. And so we did a couple of takes of that to kind of record for posterity. And, you know, she really actually like had written a, you know, just a beautiful piece that was poetry by the time she finished with it. Right. You could tell it was like a life parable. And so like some of that so we have that in the book that that we have for release from the Kickstarter here now. And so that was her point of at least like the actual direction of it. And again, from there, our opportunity was to try to make this a commitment that would be sustainable for her. And again, you know, I think at that time she had a recurring role on a soap opera where again, she was doing just smaller takes, but again, you know, still with that same gravity and same, and basically same presence that, you know, we all know her for. And so that was the mix that we had to start off with. And right now is still in that same standpoint.
Dedren gave me a chance to read the book, you know, before he sent it out to the Kickstarter backers. And it was very well done. I will say the specific parts that you talked about, you know, for her, you know, her character and the lessons, it definitely comes through like, in exactly like you intended. It's just a very comforting and guiding presence to the, you know, all of the women who are in this story. And I'm really excited to see, you know, like once people get it, what they think about it, because I loved it and I can't wait for the next one.
Oh, all right. No, I'm honest. And, you know, we're excited and absolutely want to make sure to credit Sarah A. Macklin, who came in as an editor to support us on this. But it transcends editing. You know, she so much so that we'll have to have her we will have her as a co-writer on the series going forward, because she really helped bring some fantastic points, just not only in the story that we had, but in being able to shape this into the saga that we truly wanted to be. Right. So I think she really brought an expertise that, you know, myself as a writer, you know, I could see that I needed to make this meet all those expectations for not only what we have for this book, but to make it something that could go forward. So absolutely, shout out to Sarah on that. So she really helped shape that resonance that I feel like the book has.
We touched on this a little bit earlier, but where did you draw your inspiration for the world of Sorghum and Spear?
Sorghum and Spear came from a love affair of two Dungeons and Dragon properties. One's called Dragonlance and one's called Forgotten Realms. And so those are very high fantasy. They feel more like Lord of the Rings, and Dragonlance is more of the Forgotten Realms is like the main kind of what we think about when we think of Dungeons and Dragons, fighting goblins and going about. And Dragonlance was more of like honor and romance, or almost an Arthurian take to it. But those two were fantastic books. But there were no black people. There were no brown people. There were none of those. And I remember it was a summer where there was a new set that was coming out. And it's called Dark Sun. And this was the one where there were going to be people of color. And so I remember getting it. And I probably still have that original box somewhere in this house. And I got it. And there were black people on it. But they looked like slaves. They were like slaves that were breaking out of chains. Right? They were people that were out in the middle of a desert, you know, but they didn't seem to be. It wasn't as, I guess, the way I felt, not a sense of disappointment, but it was the idea of when they finally make this world that's full of brown and black people, it's the idea of slavery, and it just didn't feel right. And I know this wasn't their intent, but again, we see this all the time in Hollywood, you know, where it's that, you know, if there's a story that's told to like a particular size, a particular budget, it's got to be you're overcoming oppression, or you're stuck in this circumstance, or, you know, we're the help that's helping somebody else move along. And I felt like it was a great setup, but it didn't tell anything about it. Africa didn't exist. None of these parts that I couldn't draw anything from it outside of, you know, they just kind of made these people brown and made them where they're in a hard situation. And so my thing was, okay, we're going to take a great rule set that they have and let's make something that's a little different. And at that point, I was looking for my own kind of connection to Africa. It was more, again, in that sense of Pan-Africanism, of trying to figure out, you know, what do I truly know about Africa, you know, from like the diaspora, from language or any of those parts, and just realized my stuff really was pretty basic, and started looking at, okay, well, what's something that I could find that would be like a good story, that if I had to look at something that's kind of Dungeons and Dragons, like in this whole continent of history and heritage, what could I find? And so I was drawn to the story of the Dahomey Amazons of Benin. And so those are and for folks that may know or don't know, they're not only a fighting force of women that protected the kingdom of Benin from the turn of century France, but also they are thought to be one of the draws for the Amazons from DC's Wonder Woman. So like the Odyssey of the Amazons. Of course, we think of Amazons and we think of you know, of those of like Brazil and indigenous people there. But there is some context to this, not only a fighting force, but a governing force. So I think that's the other part too, is that they operated with this sense of autonomy, and the same way that we think of Spartans and these Vikings and warriors of history, like they stand right there with it. They were skilled with rifle, they're skilled with hand-to-hand combat. But this is like not fantasy. These are real people, right? And it's a real part of a culture that until I actually went to look for it, I had no idea. And so we used that and said, okay, these are Dahomey Amazons, and the word that they use is Mino. And so we changed our character's name, is like, so that's the subset or the character class that you could be. So instead of being a barbarian or a priest or a warrior, we could make a Mino. And so that meant that you were like an ascended warrior that could do these type of things. And so then I went out, and the same time we were trying to get people to learn to play Dungeons and Dragons. That's not a thing that we think of as a air quote black activity, especially coming into the 90s for a lot of folks. But it was like, you know what, look, we can make something. If you come here, you know, we can start looking through these books. And if you see something that you want to make, and, you know, we can make it. And it was the idea of us just being able to sit around and not only play this game and kind of make a a world that we felt like was represented, but again, made us appreciate and find a way to actively try to look up and learn about African history outside of African American history. And so that was where that gave us just a wealth of information to build from. And so for all the characters that we work on with Sorghum and Spear, I try to take some snippet of a diaspora look from African, Latin America, indigenous, and traditional traditional cultures, and try to bring some part to that into the story, into the backdrop, into the character design. So working with someone like a Wellington Nomo who likewise loves history like me in that sense, you know, we'll spend weeks trying to design their shoes right. So we want to make it, particularly when we focus so much on women of color, particularly Black women, that we're doing our due diligence, not only from a design standpoint, but from a partnership standpoint. And so, you know, we try to be extremely appreciative of doing that due diligence and bringing those partnerships in. So likewise, it's a learning experience for us every time we make a page. And so that's been part of the happiness that's been of making this book, but also it's in part of the time that it takes to get this book out as well. So if anything, I try to honor and appreciate all parts of it. And it's fun for me. And to that point, just trying to figure out the way to just make it resonate the way that I hope it comes across.
Now, given the misrepresentation throughout history, how important is storytelling in capturing authentic narratives?
I think that's everything. I think, you know, we always, particularly as much media and things that we consume, there's always a line of things that are appropriation versus appreciation. You know, that can be perspective. We always don't know another person's background or story or experiences. But at the same time, I think we have enough shared culture, particularly in the geek culture. I mean, and I think that's what draws us all to it, is that, you know, there's what we see and what we feel in that fandom. And it's such an emotional attachment that we find in the fantastic, particularly in the Black and inclusive fantastic storytelling, because as Moana said about, you know, her own perspective, it's hard to find. And then I think when you find it, for us, it means that much more when we see it done and done well. But at the same time, it hurts that much more when we see it done poorly. Yes. And so I think that's that part that for Superman could, you know, something could, you know, we kind of use it in a general sense. Superman doesn't affect white culture the same way that Black Panther affects Black culture, right? It's, you know, if we look at it just from apples to apples of the way that they handle those characters, I mean, it doesn't matter. Superman is going to be here for forever. You know, but you think it took 20 some plus years for them to do Black Panther, and then it was apprehension to do that. So it's just a way to say that even with the same things and with the same ability and same audience, that stuff's treated differently. But if we disseminate it down to for the independents, where we're all able to craft our own story and craft our own narrative, I think that's where our stories resonate better. And from those people that find the time and find us in these spaces, I think that we find those engagements to be not only more authentic, but more sustainable. Because I think when we find people that share that same passion and the same appreciation for unique stories and for unique storytellers, that we know that's our humanity, that, you know, that's our empathy, that's our most precious resource, particularly in times like now, right? Yeah. So it's something that makes the valuation of such just priceless. And so I think story is everything. I think it transcends every other aspect of what we do as creatives.
Okay, so transitioning a little bit, you're also a host on your own podcast, the New Wakanda podcast. What inspired you to create that, and can you tell us a little bit about it?
Oh, absolutely. So the New Wakanda podcast, I co-host with Colin Kell, who is a a writer, a cosplayer. She has so many titles: essayist, womanist, and an overall geek girl that absolutely taught me a lot through our years of doing this podcast. And the podcast for New Wakanda is one about Black creativity, but I think it's for us, it's been a cathartic release of where we are in the space as Black creatives. Not to say, hey, this is my new project, but hey, this is what this project has meant or has done or has affected me. And I think for this, it's been a chronicle of, as an independent creator, particularly independent creators of color, in a cultural kind of in a culturally accelerated space here in Atlanta, Georgia, where so much is going on, and you're just one person trying to get your story out. What does that look like? What does that sound like? And how is it when things go wrong? As a lot of times we find things go wrong more than they go right. And us just being just honest and real and in an uncensored space, us just getting together, and this is what happened, right? This is why I did this project. This is what I hope it happened, and this is what did and didn't happen. And in a real sense, us trying to figure out that creative journey. So we talk about that as our part, and we get it all the time. And I'm sure for y'all as well, where folks are coming to you because they see you, they see themselves in you, they see representation and support in the things that you do, and they want to know, well, how did you get started? Where did you come from? And well, I think we can all answer that, but I think it's also important for us to be able to honestly express where we are versus where we started and where we, that space in between. A lot of times for us as creatives is when we're most quiet and frankly most vulnerable. And that's where so many dreams stop right there. Yeah. Right. It's easy to start. It's easy to get a table. It's easy to get that first win. Yeah. But it's that space in between when we're not talking to each other, when the convention's over, and it's just you and your day job more than likely and your realities. And how do you get back to this space, right? And it's us talking about trying to get back, sometimes not making it back, and sometimes being able to figure out if not, then what's next.
One of the many things you do is write for RAZRWING Incorporated, which is a company in the gaming space.
Right.
Tell us a little about that, and how does writing games compare to writing comics?
Oh, that's a great question. So with RAZRWING, they're the transmedia platform that works in augmented reality and an intersection of augmented reality and clothing. So they have a gaming platform that intersects, just in a future sense, that basically the clothing that you wear affects the gameplay that you have. Oh. And so they are about 10 years ahead of where my mind could be on some of these things, but it's an opportunity again to kind of be able to craft a storyline about a desolated world and the people that interact with each other, basically are trying to figure out friend from foe, and basically in a sense of being able to figure out the scans that your clothing give off. It becomes a puzzle game more so of like, how are you friends and how can you interact with this person? Being able to try to write for that, it's been more of trying to write backstory and make the interactions match more so than trying to tell people how the story is to go. So to kind of clarify that a bit, all I'm trying to do is get two people to stand in front of each other and understand what the rules of engagement are for this game. But say for Sorghum and Spear, I have to make you care about NAMAZZI and why this girl with all this power refuses to use it, right? And so I think that's the part of figuring out the nuances for each, because like everything, we write the pages to write the words to the page, but it's that interpretation that you want. You want it to resonate. There's a certain reaction, a certain expectation that you want them to have when they turn the page. And so in gaming, it being so interactive, there's 1,000 different things that somebody could do. And you have to, in that sense, and that's for programmers and other parts to play in that too, is you have to figure out, of these 1,000 things, what should be next. So it's bigger in that space, but the page turn is the words as you have them. So it's a different mode of thinking. But I think for that, because this game is more based on human interaction more than you pressing a button. If you think of it kind of in a more of a Pokemon Go, right? They have to think of, you could go anywhere in the world, literally in the world, and they've got to attribute that, Psyduck is here, and this rare Pikachu's there, and so you have to write the story to be engaged for you to make you do a certain action or to have a certain expectation. And so trying to develop games is kind of part of our transmedia platform, because I feel like the same way that we look at comics, we look at television, we look at film, games is right there, right? So some of the biggest things in the world are Among Us and Fortnite, and those are multi-billion-dollar platforms that influence all of our kids and a lot of adults as well. But at the same time, there's story in that, there's narrative in that, and again, there's also opportunities of representation in that. And so that's where I look at it to say that being able to write in characters a lot of times that might be overlooked or underrepresented, as well as finding ourselves in the technology space to design and develop those as well, are the key points that I also try to bring into Subsume. So in some kind of working with RAZRWING, not only allow me to write a story and write the narrative that could culturally find myself or have others see themselves represented, but also help to bring a technical acumen that I can also be in that space as a developer, as a producer, and also be able to ensure that those visuals and that those cadences of the way that people see a virtual world, that they're included there as well.
So along with that, what are some of the challenges you face writing games, and which do you enjoy writing more, the games or the comics?
Well, let's see. Writing games is fun because it depends on the platform, right? Because side-scrolling games are different from role-playing games, or kind of like like a World of Warcraft versus a Sonic the Hedgehog, right? They both require writing. They both require some story, some narrative, a reason for you to care about the characters. But, that could be exponentially different for one to the other. That's part of the excitement of writing for games. But the thing with games is you don't control how the pages work. And as a writer, you have to write towards what the gameplay does, right? So there's not any role-playing elements in Sonic for a lot of those games. So, right, so that stuff doesn't work there. You have to simply make people understand, what happens when you grab 100 rings, right? Or, why does he grab 100 rings? Why is that important? You kind of outlining more narration versus, well, what does Sonic do when he goes home, right? It's none of that. You don't care. You care, but you don't care. Look for how some people write to that. So it's not as in depth, I guess, to say. And, before a role-playing game, it's all narrative. The people could care less and less about how the game actually plays, but they care more about their character's development. So if you look at something like Final Fantasy is a development in that series where it started, but it kind of is in that sense now. But I think it's something more like the game Among Us is a great idea and the premise, right? That doesn't have a lot of writing because it has a lot more of the interaction with the people. So you wouldn't write as much for that. You just want people to understand what their situation is, and then you want humans to be humans and do all the things that we do, right? And so that part works. So all that to say, I still prefer writing for comics more because I think with that you have a lot more control. That's the good and the bad, right? That it can just be you and you can just write the story and how it ends. And again, in that sense, long as you can get an artist to understand and interpret, what your vision is for the way the story goes, then you pretty much are set. But in games, you absolutely have to have developers and other parts and people who may not be as involved in the story process because they may be more oriented in other ways of developing and being creative. But you have to make it work in the confines of that as well.
That's interesting. That's actually really helpful because at one point we had been talking with someone who was, had the idea that we should do kind of like a app for, the Wildcard Chronicles. And I was like, oh man, I said, that's like a whole other world. Like, this is not just going to happen overnight. I'm like, let's just focus on the comic for now.
that can be, if with resource, like everything, resources can help that stuff out. But it can be, it's a great exercise.
Yeah.
And again, you don't even have to have a game to write in gaming. But again, I think as all the things that we see in the transmedia world, it's all about to be the same difference in a real sense. If you're able to write towards a script and a story, it's just so much. It's becoming so similar now. If you think of like the cutscenes in a game, there are many movies at this point, right? And it's the same way. They're directed by directors for film now, and all that stuff is it's all about to be a one of one. That it's just they're going to just beam all of it to us at once. So again, that writing stuff is always going to be critical. But I think we're thinking about different platforms. It all is going to mesh sooner than later.
Now, you have a big event coming up on Saturday, February 6th. What do you have planned, and what can attendees expect to get out of this experience?
Yeah, so I'm looking at creating a pop-up event for our platform, Subsume, where we have a virtual engagement platform that allows people to come in through a virtual reality setup and create an avatar and actually interact with people in real time. So the event, strangely enough, I haven't named yet. It is just going right now. I've been playing with the idea of Black Future Month versus Black History Month, right? And so the idea is that we all want to reflect and appreciate the legacy of all that is happening, but as a futurist, I also want to look at and appreciate that we're all making a collaborative and creative future right now, and that the stuff that we're doing resonates further than we know. I think collectively, if we look at it in that sense, that our future is obviously based on the past and the foundation of the present, but we want to look at ourselves as having a space and a place in the future, whether or not that's through technology, through creativity, through jobs, through government. We have to. I think that's a part of our Black history, right? Is the way that I look at it. My perspective is the idea of like speculative fiction and Afrofuturism is you have to be able to see and imagine yourself in the situations you want to be, even if it's something that you yourself may not be able to obtain. So I think of it as, we look at if we look at it from even in a simple sense or a simple parable of the legacy of indentured servitude and slavery in America, that these people imagined being free, imagined eventually, it would be speculative fiction to think of a Black president or a person of color woman vice president. That if you walked and said that at that point, that's you couldn't conceive that, but somebody did conceive that, right? It's the way somebody had to imagine that there's something better than this, and there's something better that the work that I do today I may not see the results of, but that is part of a legacy forward. And so that's what happens. And I mean, and the more and more we go back and look at history, we see that those people were future forward. They're future thinkers. They didn't look at their circumstances. This is what it is. It's more of, even in this circumstance, I dare to dream of what can be. Right. And so my thing is, I think looking at it in that sense of that, what we have control over now is, even with all the great stories and storytellers that we know, that we need to look at ourselves and picture ourselves in those successful and influential spaces in these futures. So as we're looking at video games and technology and parts, and the future doesn't always have to mean tech, because I think for us, the future is still very much paper. It's still very much human interaction. And the further that we create a digital version of ourselves, that just, again, increases the valuation of our physical selves. So we want to make sure that we have a space and a place to ensure that we have that lens to say, you know, what we do here today impacts tomorrow. That's a rambling way to say is I haven't fixed it yet, and we're going to try to make that the title or title-ish, and we're going to make it. It's going to be a free event and an engagement. Obviously, we'll pass that along to you and your subscribers. But we just want people to just come in and be able to see and appreciate that, you know, we still, despite all the things that are different and are impacting us, that we still have a collaborative impact on our future. So, and that's probably more of a nod to N.K. Jemison's, you know, how long till Black Futures Month. So we say, well, you know, I think we're going to make Black Futures Month and try to do something in that sense.
I like that. When you said it, I was like, oh yeah, that sounds good. So we talked a little bit about a bunch of your different endeavors, and you founded not only Greene County Creative, but also Subsume, which is your platform to support the writers, artists, technologists, and social innovators. What inspired you to develop all of these platforms, and what things can we expect in 2021?
It's a great question. So Subsume came about with I think it was just a perspective of that I have an opportunity to support a lot of people with their crowdfunding campaigns. So early on, I was a fair adopter to Kickstarter and work well in that space, and a lot of indie, particularly Black indie creators, have asked me and continue to ask, you know, how to set up and how to set up things for their crowd funds and how to build out audience engagements with their work. Also get a chance to see as kind of in consult a lot of their work and try to navigate things to the way that I think that folks want their work to be. But that said, it was an idea of we're all out here doing it ourselves, but I think there's a way for all of us to do it together. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of Subsume was to try to make it a platform that was a support foundation for folks that we could all try to ease the burden of trying to do it all alone. So I think is the way that I used to say it, or say it still, in kind of relating back to our idea of being able to see our future and our ancestors doing this, was that we can't sharecrop our dreams, right? We can't, as a collective of creators, particularly for people of color, we can't wait for our turn to come. But we've seen so many times that it's not even that people in space, but that time rarely comes. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't come without extreme effort. And even when it comes, it doesn't come with lamentation and a lot of times confrontation for you to have what should be an inalienable right. And the thing is, you know, for us, the things that we're asking for are very simple, right? We're just asking to make comic books, to be able to tell our stories, and somehow, some way, not make this where we have to make the decision of making a book and paying rent, right? So we there's an idea of this starving artist that, you know, history's taught us that, you know, to be good at art, you can't be good at art and have a full stomach at the same time, or you can't be good at art and be appreciated while you're alive. It's the idea of, you know, we can do all those things, and I think the pandemic's been a perfect circumstance to see that how much the arts and media and all these things influence our life, right? It's all the things that we took for granted now when, you know, we're in a pandemic. You see, like, how much do you rely on these streaming services and books and things to not only engage and teach, but just to stay sane, right? And now we have it, and we're insatiable creatures. We can't make this stuff fast enough, or the places that we used to get it can't make it fast enough. So I mean, I think that also makes it a great opportunity for us as any creators to find our voice, and not only to find our voice recognized, but to find agency in that voice, that we don't have to ask permission to be our best selves. And so that was the idea with Subsume. And there was a creator that I felt like really got what I was trying to put down with. We're trying to make that collective with Marco Lopez, who was somebody I was a fan of to start off with. And I mean, this gentleman, as was Eisner winning editor, had a lot of books and had a lot of the same ideas of, the world works different than the way that we're trying to make ourselves work, right? We see it it's just the economics of it, that the things that we're asking for aren't impossible. But I think if because everybody has so many other things as indie creators, a lot of times have to focus on and work on to try to get their work even seen, not even seen, but just done. It takes a Herculean effort to make a single comic. I'm a personal witness and attest to that. Just that 122 pages can cost you your life. If you in a sense, it's something that we want to avoid. We want people to focus on the things that they're good at. So whether that's an artist, that's a writer, that's a penciler, that's a podcaster, we want to make people able to fulfill their dreams. And we feel like if we can just all partner up and kind of squad up to see things successful, that'll be it. And so that's the idea of the platform for Subsume, is to make that burden a little easier by lifting together.
So for people who want to get involved with Subsume, how does that work?
That's just simple. Just a simple, hey, hand raise. We're, if anything, it's just reaching out to us through myself or Marco or our social channels. I think for that, we're always looking for ways to champion underserved and underrepresented voices. We make sure that, for any type of program or project that we do, that we're looking to be as inclusive as possible. We're very intentional about making sure, not just for count, but for consensus, that we're making sure those voices are not only in the room, but also in positions of authority. So working with, say, like an Allison Cheney, who has her own fantastic book and actually did win for the Glyph Awards. She won, it's not Rookie of the Year. I got to think of the way that they say it. I think it's Newcomer of the Year with her book, Love University. But she writes in film. So she handles all the film writing and development for the work that we do in that sense. And so, and she tells us what to do on that. So that's not a thing of us bringing her on just to say, hey, can you help us do the things we want to do? It's the things of us being able to support her and her career. And then likewise, her giving us the best of herself in the writing that she engages with us for Subsume. So I think with that, we're always looking to figure out what is the story that all of us can't wait to hear next, that needs to be out. And I've personally put my own story to the side because somebody got something better. And so I think we got to work in that sense of it doesn't I don't have to win. Long as somebody I know is winning, I really don't care about that. And I think that's always been my calling card, and probably have more projects than I should say. But in that sense, I just want good stories. That's it. I don't want to have to be you're the one, right? If I can only think of one for somebody that is the representation. We've done that. History in Hollywood does that to its fault, right? It's we can't have just one LGBT QA positive writer. We can't just have one on the staff and we've got our one. We can't just have one woman in the executive room. Oh, we got our one. We have to figure out a way that everybody can not only feel included, but be included. Yeah. And so I think that's the idea of Subsume, right? Is that by definition means to be included without effort, right? That in the Venn diagram of the things that you want to be, that you find yourself in the middle. And so that's the reason of the name of Subsume is you shouldn't have to work that hard to be your true self, right? To be appreciated, particularly in the creative space. And so if we can't find freedom and agency there, then as a society, we have a problem. And so that's the thing of us really wanting to just help folks tell their story.
I'm so glad we got to talk about this because I've been, wanting to know more about, when you transitioned to Subsume and, what you were trying to accomplish. So we're getting a lot of good feedback in the comments too. Like, this is amazing. Danny J. Quick said, "I've known Dedren for years and I've never heard his story. This is so cool to hear."
Yeah, I think, and I appreciate this opportunity. I absolutely do not talk about myself at all, so I appreciate the opportunity to have the candid and personal touch to me rambling about myself. So no, it's great, and no, and I'm appreciative, obviously, of the support that y'all give, not here on screen, but and helping me get get here, and I'm sure the next steps we'll all have together. So it's always a pleasure, and yeah, I mean, all this is great.
Yeah, we love what you do. We've been following your work for a while. Sorghum and Spear. I mean, African diaspora. You had me at that. So I'm also a fan of history. I mean, clearly. So so anything in that space, I'm in there.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing is I think there's so many just beautiful legacies that are still yet untold. I mean, we could have 1,000 lifetimes and wouldn't know of all the heritage and history of Hawaii and or of any other part of the world. But a lot of time we only get just a minuscule part that's repeated and regurgitated time and time again. Yes. And when we're tired of those stories, we get those stories again. And so that's the thing of why I think we see such passion and such great engagement with independent comics, particularly from people of color. Is people are like, what is this fantastic thing? And it's just us. And I think that's just what it is.
Oh, I love this community. It's like every time every time we talk to somebody new, it's like, oh, look at all our great people.
We got some good folks, obviously present company included, but I think that's the other part that just drives me to just go as hard as I can just to see something for all of us, because it's just too many good people that I think we all know, any of which could be everything that we all dream, but I think we could all see all of us, on that proverbial stage together, all getting our due, and and being alive to see it. So I think that's it. That's it. That's my claim to fame. I just want to live to see it. So if I can do that, I think we're all right.
Well, all righty. I think we're at the end. So for those who would like to follow you or learn more about Subsume, where should they find you?
Thank you. Our main website for Subsume related activities is subsumelife.com. We also are on Twitch, so we're rebooting that Twitch here now. For our main program annually that we have is the Subsume Summit. We do still have that original page up at subsumesummit.com. You can find me on Instagram at Dedren Snead. I'm most active on Facebook. So if you just ping me there, I'm around in that. But in that sense, I think with our kickoff here in February, we're looking at giving more engagement for our main work for Sorghum and Spear. That website is sorgumandspear.com. We got some new things that'll come out with that very soon, and excited to kind of share and showcase several projects that, because of the COVID pandemic last year, we had to put on pause, but now trying to double up this year and get a lot of the work that Subsume has been working on out in front of everybody. So we're very, very pleased with some things that we'll be able to share with everybody very soon. Any
closing comments, Dana?
No, I'm just happy that we had you on the podcast. We're so excited to see what 2021 is going to have from all of your platforms, and definitely seeing more that come out of your creativity.
Oh, pleasure. And again, I'm excited to see y'all's rise. Again, this podcast has been fantastic. I was so happy to support the Quick Starter and to see the engagement already running into March and forward. And so again, anytime I can see great successes like this, is I'm happy to support. So anything and everything I can do, you have it. Thank y'all again.
Absolutely. We appreciate that. All right, everybody. Thank you guys so much for tuning in on YouTube and on Facebook. Please like, subscribe, and share so that we can help grow our audience. If you have other guests or, stories that you would like to hear on the podcast, drop us an email at moananuipodcast.com and be on the lookout for more episodes coming soon. Take care, everybody. Be safe, and we will talk to you later.